Today's tip is to help your hips and hamstrings. The hip is a ball and socket joint, with the head of the femur forming the ball and the pelvis the socket. This design allows for the greatest range of motion in the body, next to the shoulder joint, which is also a ball and socket joint, by the way. Listen to episode 88 about shoulders if you missed it. The hip has three main movements: flexion and extension, moving the leg backward and forward; abduction and adduction, moving the leg out to the side and then in towards the other leg; and rotation, moving the foot left and right. Above the hips lie the muscles of your core, which, when activated, provide stability. Below the pelvis are the muscles that free up the hips and allow for lower body movement, like quadriceps, hamstrings, hip flexors, and glutes, to name only a few. Unfortunately, prolonged sitting can cause these muscles around the joint to become tight. For example, the hamstrings remain flexed and shorten. This can result in reduced mobility and potentially pain. Tightness in the hip flexors and hamstrings can alter the alignment in the pelvis, which affects the way the spine lines up, causing low back pain. In fact, tight hip flexors can cause all sorts of problems, including poor posture, anterior pelvic tilt, which can cause the belly to look a little larger regardless of weight, a higher risk of injury, and even an increase in anxiety levels. In addition, tight hips can lead to muscle imbalances. When the muscles aren't working like they should, other muscles come in and overcompensate to pick up the slack. Not only does this greatly increase injury risk, but it also means that we're unable to perform at our best during any activity we want to take on. Now, acute or chronic pain in these areas can be a sign of a medical concern, which should be addressed by your physician or healthcare professional. So, check with them before making any big changes in your routine. If the root of the pain is due to tight hips and reduced mobility, the tips to follow may be helpful. So, what can you do to help those hips and hamstrings loosen things up and improve or prevent pain? Well, obviously the desk job is the killer on the hips. In 2019, the average adult American was sitting for 6.5 hours per day, while teens 12 to 19 sat for 8 hours a day. Thanks to remote work and remote school, I am sure those numbers are much higher these days. A standing desk is a great change, but if this isn't an option, setting a little reminder or alarm to get you up and moving every 15 minutes or so is your next best bet. You don't necessarily need to even leave your desk. Just stand up, do a few gentle stretches, more on that in a second, then sit back down. Done consistently over time, this strategy will make a huge difference in your life. Trust me. Next, regardless of whether or not you're able to reduce the amount of sitting you do, stretching and mobility exercises are an important addition to your day. Follow the link in the show notes for pictures and descriptions of these exercises. Hip flexors shorten and tighten due to prolonged sitting, so starting with a kneeling hip flexor stretch is a great idea. Bonus, this stretch can also be done at your desk while seated in your chair. You can also stretch out the hip rotators at your desk, performing both the internal rotator stretch and external rotator stretch. Then you'll have to stand up and stretch those tight hamstrings. Next, you'll want to work on improving mobility in the hips. Mobility exercises are different from stretching exercises or flexibility. Mobility is the ability to move a limb freely through its full range of motion. Mobility exercises are dynamic or involve slow, controlled movement. Flexibility exercises are static. They're held for a short period of time, around 30 to 90 seconds, and are focused on increasing the length of the muscle. Now, the 90-90 mobility exercise is one of my favorites for hips, followed closely by hip CARS, C-A-R-S. Hip CARS, or controlled articular rotations, is an exercise that takes your hip joint through its full range of motion. It's effective at increasing the range of motion while improving hip function and maintaining the overall health and integrity of the hip joint. Again, follow the link in the show notes for pictures and full descriptions of those exercises I just mentioned. Hopefully, by adding some of the exercises from this podcast, you'll be able to reduce pain, move better, and keep those hips and hamstrings happy. Willpower not required. Thanks so much for listening. I'd love to hear from you, so send me your tips, questions, or feedback. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Fired Up Fitness Coaching, or email me at willpowernotrequired@firedupfitness.ca. Thanks so much. I look forward to connecting with you.